Good morning from Zurich. You're listening to Monocle on Sunday with me, Tyler Brûlé. Our very first edition of the program from Zurich this year. Coming up today from Davos, our security correspondent Gorana Grgić is here. Also, Christof Münger is also joining us. A voice we haven't had around the table for a while, but Gorana, we're going to go for you first. Very slow news week ahead. What are we going to be looking at?
Nothing happening there. Of course, I think Iran front and center of the past week, and Donald Trump seemingly finding an off-ramp for that proposed military action, but then finding some sort of on-ramp to get himself to Davos. And I hear that there's plenty of announcements coming up early in the week. Indeed,
lots of aircraft coming in today. This is plane spotters heaven in Zurich right now if you want to look at government aircraft landing, which means we're going to be talking to our very own Carlota Rebelo. Also, Prashanth Shanmugan is going to be here as well. The voice was with us a little bit towards the end of last year. Anyway, it is the 18th of January 2026, live from Zurich. This is Monocle on Sunday.
Live from Zurich, this is Monocle on Sunday with Tyler Brûlé.
And good morning from a rather, you could say sort of meteorologically dull Zurich this morning, but nothing dull, and certainly here at Davos. I'm very happy to say there's an array of lovely guests around the table this morning. We have a lot to get through because it is really an extraordinary week. It is, of course, a week where, as we were just saying at the top, the world starts to descend already on Switzerland. Zurich really being much of the focal point for this. And, of course, yes, world leaders, CEOs, captains of industry, think tankers, all kinds of other people starting to make their way towards Davos, really from now. Christof Münger runs of course, the foreign desk over at the Tagesanzeiger, one of the German language newspapers of record in this country. We haven't had you around the mic for a while.
Oh,
great to see you.
Great to be back. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Just maybe set the scene for us. I don't know. Is it your domestic colleagues, or is it your international desk colleagues who are watching, monitoring who's coming in? Because it is always, I mean, we know that sort of Switzerland is a land of people who like to watch trains, they like to watch planes, etc. But this is an amazing sort of 24 hours right now. Yes. I think they said there's about 1,000 extra flight movements into the airport, which is really quite remarkable.
Yeah, it's the local team that covers the airport and about everything that happens there. And then, of course, the economic section, the domestic team, and also we from the foreign desk are involved covering the WEF in Davos. It will be a very busy week because in particular we have a very special guest up there.
Indeed, we do have a very special guest up there. This, of course, last year, President Trump joined by video link. But, of course, he is going to be there in person. And already your pages, the pages of your peer set, really talking about what this means in terms of course, a security exercise. You know, it's big, of course, if you have a vice president or even a head of state, or I should say a secretary of state coming in. But this is, of course, something completely different.
Completely different. And it's very important for Switzerland because, in particular, of the tariffs question. And I think remarkable an interview that I saw today in Sonntagsblick, one of the Sunday papers of Switzerland. And there is the interview with John Bolton, the former security advisor of Donald Trump, looking back to the first term, and what he says as a counsel to the Swiss government, he says just avoid Trump, which might be a bit difficult. Yeah. And he says don't talk to him, listen to him. Anyway, he likes to talk and he doesn't like to listen. Avoid him, and that's the best thing you can do. But I'm afraid that's not an appropriate strategy to encounter Donald Trump in Davos for the Swiss government.
Carlota Rebelo, good morning. Nice to see you.
Bon dia. Good morning.
Bon dia. Rather an impossible task, of course, when he's making the effort to come here. Of course, not a huge effort when you're flying on Air Force One, but yeah, very, very difficult to avoid. Maybe just this is a year for Davos. It's kind of amazing. It's a record year. We've never had more heads of state, some 60 plus heads of state. attending. There's never been a gathering like this. There's a lot of discussion. This is going to be a reset year. Is this going to be sort of the make or break year? Is it still relevant? Of course, it's not the first time we've heard this. But what is your take as you've got, I haven't looked under the desk, whether you've got your boots on or not. Actually, there's not a lot of snow anyway. So I think it's going to be a rather dry. And I was going to say, not so, it's better we're doing radio because it's not so picturesque, I think, if I'm Bloomberg or CNN, it's not the snowy Davos we normally know.
I know, and I wouldn't dare going up to Davos without my trusty ballet boots. But still, I feel like for the past couple of years, we've always talked about whether or not this would be the make or break for the World Economic Forum's annual meeting. And I think it's quite ironic that this year's theme is a spirit of dialogue. Of all years, to have that as a theme is quite pertinent. I was looking earlier, it is a record number of heads of state, 65 plus, 3,000 registered attendees, and as we know, there's even more than half of that attending that are not registered, that are just in town for the open forum and to attend all of the houses. So we're talking at least around 6,000 people up there. But in terms of security costs, they were saying for security alone, 9 million Swiss francs are just for the security. And in terms of the overall cost of Davos, all the enlarged footprint, and this is from the Swiss government's official press release, saying that prompted in part by the US President Donald Trump's attendance, will cost an estimated 28 million Swiss francs. So it's big numbers. And we know from last year there was rumors up until the minute that the video link started whether or not he would attend. As you might recall, it was just a few days after his inauguration. So there was all this discussion, and then it became apparent that it was just via video link. But even when the rumors were on, the amount of times that Desi and I would be hearing from other journalists, oh, I just heard that he might be landing now. This helicopter is Trump. And everyone would go into a frenzy. So I can only imagine what that's actually going to mean this year. Apparently only 1,060 slots for helicopter landings have been secured. So if we have, all these high-profile guests, we need to pay attention to the trains, because how else are they going to get up?
Well, I was going to say yes. I mean, some go by, of course, if the weather is not great, then of course people have to go by car or by train anyway. Our Andrew Tuck is standing by in London. But before that, just Gorana very, very quickly. Good morning. Maybe I'm going to give you the somewhat impossible task. Three big themes. I mean, you talked about, obviously, Iran is one topic, but because we have Greenland sitting here right now, because we have Zelensky, of course, showing up, what are going to be maybe the three defining topics if you look into Gorana's crystal ball this morning?
Wow, Gorana's crystal ball. I should have brought it to be able to look at it. Look, I think that in terms of the framing of the whole gathering, we definitely see now the kind of, if you want, solidification of this paradigm change, where really it is the heads of states, leaders really, who are dictating the terms, but it starts all with Donald Trump, right? Like, it is his world these days. We happen to live in it. And some of these discussions around, tariffs on whichever now set of countries, whether it's related to Greenland or particular bilateral discussions, this is very much the kind of context, right? So it is a world where business leaders increasingly have to adjust to that, rather than assuming that we still live in some sort of paradigm or are going anywhere in the kind of status quo ex ante, where, we lived in this time where markets decided things. And I think if there was ever any doubt, I think that it's been dispelled by the past year, and pretty much every single country out there in the world is looking at economic security as something that's very much high policy, and basically trying to figure out how do they navigate the world where increasingly there are barriers to trade, barriers to movement of people, and similar. But then when it comes to specific questions, look, in the lead up now to WEF, what we've seen is that Ukraine is trying to be put back on the top of the agenda, which of course it wasn't now for the past 2-3 weeks because of Venezuela, because of Iran, right? So we have this announcement that there is going to be a meeting of G7, that there is going to be some sort of push, because of course Trump is there, Zelensky is there, the leaders of G7 are mostly going to be there. So trying to iron out what's going to happen with these security guarantees, with also economic relief that has to keep on going down. And then all of this is going to be going on while there is an uneasy discussion around how to respond to what Trump wants to do with Greenland. And of course, overnight, just this news about the proposed 10% tariffs that might hit 8 European nations as of February 1 are going to be something that, again, these leaders are going to have to find a way to compartmentalize. One way to cooperate on trying to aid Ukraine together with Trump, and then at the next meeting, potentially having these very hard discussions. And we've seen some of the images. I think that was quite striking. The foreign ministers of Greenland and Denmark back in DC earlier this week, really like getting out, needing to have a smoke of cigarette after those discussions. And this is something that is going to be very hard. We've also heard just sort of through various grapevines that Trump wants to make a kind of splash in these speeches that he's going to give, or the central speech. But I would also say that what I expect there is more of the, again, same thing, kind of protectionism, economic nationalism, Don Roe doctrine kind of transposed to this particular field. So, I guess that's what the crystal ball says at this point.
Andrew Tuck, pardon me, our editor-in-chief is with us in London this morning. Andrew, is it also a week for news editors to go out and have a smoke as well around the back?
I think it's been, since the start of this year, I think there's been a need to have a sneaky cigarette or two, I think almost every day. What a rolling list of stories, from, as we were saying, from Venezuela to Iran, and now the spotlight back on what's happening in Greenland. The quantity of news, I think, as Gorana hinted there, is so overwhelming that actually very important stories really do get lost and moved on from in such rapid succession. And we know there are many other conflicts going on around the world that just don't get into the headlines anymore. Even something like Gaza, while we're seeing this board being appointed this week, it almost feels like old news. So, as you said, the spotlight on Greenland, and we have a team who will be departing in a few hours' time, heading to Nuuk via Copenhagen. That's where the story will certainly be partly next week, as well as in Davos.
Andrew, maybe I just want to bring everybody in on this. So here we have, of course, an announcement over the last 24 hours, 36 hours, that, of course, Trump wants to impose tariffs on those who are not, part of a new coalition of the willing in terms of supporting his actions to take over Greenland, whatever form that might be. Chris, I want to bring you in on this. Do you think that this is already sort of part of a strategy that they knew sort of 3 or 4 weeks ago that it's been thought through, or is this from the hip, something that came up on Thursday evening that let's do this with Europe and because we've been talking about divisions on the continent, has this been part of it, do you think?
I think it looks like that it comes from the hip, as most of the things Donald Trump does. But what I'm really wondering, we might see that up in Davos, whether he's going to connect the Ukraine question with the Greenland question in a way that he says, okay, give us Greenland, then we help you with Ukraine. Otherwise, take care yourself with Ukraine. That's a very, very big leverage, and I'm afraid that he could use it, and that would be very bad news for Ukraine, of course, as Europe as well, of course.
Carlota, probably not beyond the realm of possibility. Also, Gorana, I see you nodding your head there as well.
Yes, it will be precisely one of the key topics, I think, to watch in Davos, when that meeting that we all know is going to happen on the sidelines between Zelensky and Trump and some other members of European delegations, what will actually be the outcome. And, we've seen this strategy before. It's quite insane to think that it's barely been a year of a Trump presidency, or a year to the day now. And we've seen a strategy of using tariffs, of using economic levies as a form of persuading the conversation or persuading diplomacy to get what he wants. And we need to remember that when there was first mentions of the Greenland question months ago, he did hint at, this can go the easy way or the hard way, but we're going to have that territory. And I think we all fall victims, and when I say we, the media, the public, those who believe in democracy, of not taking Trump at his word. And that was a mistake from his first presidency, and I think we're falling into that again.
He started with Greenland already in his first presidency.
Exactly.
He said that he wanted to buy it. Now he's been talking about military means for a year regarding Greenland, and I would take him very seriously.
Gorana, you spend enough time on the other side of the Atlantic as well. One thing we've been hearing in the background, though, of course, there is a military bureaucracy. There are generals who, of course, he has to listen to. We're maybe to believe, you're talking about Iran at the top, that they didn't strike Iran because they said, if you can topple 2 or 3 people at the pointy end of leadership in Tehran, doesn't mean it's going to be regime change. And is this maybe perhaps a saving grace down the track for Greenland as well, that you have enough generals saying, look, this is just not going to work?
Yeah, I mean, before we get even to the sort of military option as an option in the sort of panoply of things that might be there, we can't take, of course, the Greenland question now out of the context of Venezuela and the kind of momentum that has been built, because this tactically, of course, and operationally was a mission that was displaying all the might that US possesses in terms of special ops, right, in terms of intelligence and how they do it. But that's one thing that you can do sort of in a very kind of near region, and that you do in this sort of way where already there were some, cracks that were appearing, that, there were leaks from within the regime. There was pressure put on Maduro and so on. Greenland is a territory part of Denmark that is a NATO ally, right? And we can't underscore how different this is, right? Just as the kind of main premise. And then from there, I would say it's not just about, mulling the potential military action, but in thinking about how, the broader foreign policy bureaucracy would respond, or particular branches of military, but what this is doing within the US political system, because now we are seeing the activation of Congress that has been quite sleepy, quite acquiescent. We've seen now a congressional delegation that went to Copenhagen that is trying to exert pressure. There still is a bipartisan consensus, even though, again, we are operating in this kind of context of extreme political polarization, but there are still Republicans out there in the Congress, both the House and Senate, that see the value of NATO, right? And that understand what it means now that United States is essentially threatening one of its foremost allies, actually, if you think about Denmark and its track record in cooperating with the United States all throughout the duration of the alliance. So that's one thing there. So I would be looking at the Congress. Of course, the military part of the equation is an important one. But I think even before we get to that, so, the deployment now of kind of the forward presence, let's say, of European countries, these 8 that have, or 7 plus Denmark, that have positioned extra troops to Greenland, is something that should serve more as a kind of signal that, hey, we are trying to do something. They, of course, can't reckon with the US might, but I wouldn't go as far that the United States might actually move this way. I would say that what we could expect way more as a potential is that Donald Trump relies more on conditionality, that he relies on various other things, right, connected to Ukraine, or some other things, again, using now economic kind of punishments as a potential leverage to try to extract compliance from Denmark before we even get to kind of positioning or deploying troops out to High North.
Andrew, I just want to bring in the angle from London, because, of course, you mentioned, let's say the Gaza Committee, which has been formed, and rather surprisingly, maybe not surprisingly, that, of course, that we have former Prime Minister Tony Blair is going to, of course, and he's one of the high-profile names who is going to be sitting amongst many others. And then at the same time, we heard that Keir Starmer was going to be part of this. That's not the case unless the invitation hasn't arrived yet. And now, of course, very high profile in the news this morning as well. If these tariffs go ahead from February 1st, the UK could get slapped with 10% on everything. The view from London this morning.
Starmer has made it clear that he feels that this is, let's put it mildly, not helpful, and has come out strongly in opposition to these tariffs. And it's also interesting because I think there is some complexity around what Donald Trump is saying, because none of these countries, Denmark for instance, doesn't have an individual trade agreement with the US. It's all done via the EU. So essentially, it will be punishing the entire EU because there's no way of picking apart, what's being shipped from Denmark if it's going from Germany, for example, or going from Poland. Who knows and who can guess? So that's not possible. So also within the EU, there's still legislation going through to approve these 0% tariffs on US goods in many instances. That hasn't been agreed. And many parties yesterday were saying they will block that happening. Plus today there's a meeting of the 27 EU ambassadors. So you can see that people are angered and coalescing against this. And I think that we've talked in the past, Tyler, on the show about living in a time where the only certainty is uncertainty. But I'd say we're now moving into a period where the only thing we have is the reliability of unreliable partners. And I think that's the interesting thing for Donald Trump. You can do this as many times as you want. But in the end, people begin to pull away and begin to think, how do we maneuver in a different way? And I think we were reflecting there on what this means, for Ukraine. But I would imagine the other side of that equation is if you're sitting in Russia, you're probably pretty delighted about what's being threatened here, because you're saying, we have the right to seize a large landmass next to us if we believe it's in the interests of our security. So I do think that there's going to be, I don't know, just an element of exhaustion with trying to work around these endless tariff changes. Plus, also, we have this Supreme Court judgment in the coming weeks, which may say that it's illegal to do them anyway. So we just live in a time when we just cannot rely on people we used to believe were secure partners.
Andrew, it's like being sort of at a delicatessen here right now. People should take a number because everyone's putting up their hand because they have questions. First, Carlota, you wanted to jump in with something.
Yes, just before this announcement was even made, last night about the tariffs. So last week, just to bring things back to this week ahead in Davos, last week, the World Economic Forum released their global risks report, which they always release ahead of the annual meeting, which is the risks to shape the year ahead and key points of the discussion. And the number one risk was geoeconomic confrontation. And basically they saw this as the top risk for 2026 that is most likely to trigger a global crisis. And here we are 4 days after the report came out, discussing precisely how that is influencing geopolitics in the year ahead.
Gorana.
Yep. And that report has a very sort of scary looking cover, yes. I would say. Sort of the world on a precipice and everything is kind of on fire. That's kind of my world every day. But I just wanted to say, not only, just to Andrew's point, not only if you're sitting in Moscow, you're very happy because some of these Trump moves, of course, legitimize your land grabs and so on. But if you're sitting in Beijing, you're using this opportunity, as Beijing just has this past week, to actually be proactive. And one of the stories that we didn't even pick up in the kind of avalanche of news, but I know Monocle has covered, is Mark Carney in Beijing striking a trade deal basically with China, peeling off of what has been a policy of kind of walking in lockstep with United States in basically doing things that are kind of more protectionist when it comes to China competition. And he said himself that this move now, the seeming thaw, is reflective of the new strategic realities. And this is exactly the world.
Yeah, and just I think as you've been chatting there, we've had Canadian Prime Minister Carney on the screen because he's just touched down in Doha this morning as well. And this is, again, out finding new friends in the world. Not that Qatar is necessarily new friends for Canada, but that's exactly what he's out doing and very much forging as well. Christof, very quickly.
Just would like to point out there's another side of the story regarding Trump and Greenland. That's the domestic one. With these tariffs, he will increase again the affordability crisis because things will get more expensive in the US. And also his Greenland plans, his adventure there, is not very popular with his base. And that might have an influence. I don't know yet. He seems very confident to do what he plans, but still on the domestic side, the support is not increasing. to put it mildly.
I'm just going to tell our listeners that we're going to go to the news in London in about 1 hour and not 1 hour, in 1 minute and 45 seconds. But what we're going to do coming out of the news, this is a challenge for all of our panelists. We're going to talk about other things in the news. There's a presidential election in Portugal, for example. Carlota, we'll talk about that after the news, but we'll just spend another minute and 30 seconds on topics that are Andrew. Just on that, I mean, we talked about the world of course, a busy news week. One thing, is this a good time for journalism when we start the year, when newsrooms have to look at budgets, they have to review? Is this one of those moments where people think, actually, I'm going to get an extra 10%, extra 15% because you have to be able to respond to stories like this, or not?
I think so. I think it's also a moment where you if you're...
How much money do you want, Andrew?
Well, I already managed to get quite a lot out of your pocket on Friday for this Greenland trip. It's not cheap having a nuke week, but we also, I'll send the bills yours and Anna's ways. But I think it's also a moment where you do need to look at your networks, and correspondents I don't think have ever been more important, because there are so many fires around the world that you can't send your staff to every single thing. So that network of correspondence for everybody becomes much more important. And the old bureau networks that people have maybe dismantled, suddenly I imagine there's quite a few news editors regretting the complete collapse of that system in their organizations. Luckily, we have kept that in place, and we have a great correspondent network. But that is the thing that's going to be underpinning for all of the news editors in the coming days.
Andrew, stick around with some other stories, maybe out of the UK and elsewhere, and I'm challenging everyone for that as well. Emma Nelson is back in London with the news headlines.
Thank you very much indeed, Tyler. The European Union is holding an emergency meeting in Brussels today to discuss President Trump's threat to impose 10% tariffs on European countries opposed to his wish to take over Greenland. EU leaders warn the tariffs risk damaging transatlantic relations. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has called a meeting of his security cabinet in response to President Trump's appointments to his so-called Gaza Board of Peace. Israeli officials have warned the makeup of the board contradicts Israeli policy and that Israel wasn't consulted about the composition. Around 20 people have been injured after the fifth floor of a building in Paris collapsed during a party. The upper floor of a building on Rue Amelot in the 11th arrondissement of central Paris fell onto the one below, with a total of 50 people ending up on the same level. Portugal holds the first round of its presidential elections today. The vote is being seen as a crucial test of the far right's growing influence in the country. And a business owner in Australia was shocked to arrive at work this week to see the glass windows of his office smashed in, causing thousands of dollars worth of damage. Shane Martin looked at CCTV to identify who had tried to break in, only to discover that a feral goat had headbutted the doors and windows for a full 20 minutes until they shattered. The goat had apparently seen its reflection in the window and didn't like the look of him. And those are the headlines. Back to you, Tyler, in Zurich.
Oh, goodness, Emma. Listen, we've got someone coming on from Australia in a moment who might be able to talk about that. Maybe not the cleverest of goats in that part of the world. Unlike sort of, incredibly sharp and switched on ones in this country.
Pretty determined goat. It goes for it for 20 full minutes of bashing your skull against a glass door until it gives in. I mean, it didn't like the look of himself.
Okay, quick roundtable. We'll start in London. Andrew, other things happening in the world. Draw our listeners' attention to something maybe beyond what's going to be discussed in Davos this week.
Well, there's a good story in the FT, which is about how the drinks companies are facing a kind of unprecedented backlog of sales for spirits. There's so much booze being stored by the likes of Diageo, and they literally don't know what to do with all of it now. Even nice summer drinks like Aperol didn't manage to shift the crates in a way that they used to. Partly this is obviously an affordability issue. Partly it's changing tastes amongst a younger generation of drinkers. But it does point to the fact that many of these brands now are beginning to have to maneuver around changing tastes. And there was a funny story here in the UK yesterday, which was about how many of the supermarket changes are doing Jabuanuary, I think I've said that right, which is bringing out food lines just aimed at people taking Ozempic. So they're doing, Co-op has brought out a new mini meals series, so that you have like tiny meals. But online delivery companies like Ocado now have developed online aisles in their online supermarkets just for food aimed at people taking the jab in January.
Christof, other stories out of Switzerland or beyond that might be a focus for you? If we were to open up, any of the titles from Time Media today, what's making news?
I would like to shed some light on an interview our correspondent in Paris did with Laila Slimani. She's born in Rabat but has French-Moroccan background. She's a very well-known author, a best-selling author, and she has finished the third part of a trilogy. The name of the trilogy is The Country of Others, and the third part is I'll Take the Fire. I think it should come out in English soon, if it hasn't yet. Still, the topic of the interview, as well, of course, of her books, is the question of identity. And she says that she doesn't have two identities, a French and a Moroccan. That she says she has none. She has no identity, and that's basically the topic of her book. And she lives between two worlds, and he tells that how difficult migration is, how even physically it's very difficult and takes a lot of force. She talks, of course, also about France, a country that has changed very dramatically since the terrorist attacks in 2015, Bataclan, we remember. And since then, the country has been dominated, she says, by fear, a fear that contributed, of course, to the rise of the far right. We see still today, and of course next year we have the big election. And she also says that the vision of multiculturalism, of globalism, that also was the big topic in Davos in the 1990s, that has completely disappeared. And she mentioned as a symbol of this good mood in the 90s, the celebration of the Football World Cup by the French team in 1998. That was with Arabic-rooted people, black people, white people in this team. Today, Laila Slimani lives in Portugal, and she hopes that she will be adopted culturally by this country. She lives there with her family and is some sort looking for her identity. I think she's a very remarkable person. She's a very important intellectual in France, and I can recommend her books.
And what a perfect segue, because Carlota, we've got elections in Portugal. I don't know if her residency allows her to vote, but Portugal is heading to the polls right now.
Yes, depending how long she has been living in Portugal, she may or may not be able to vote today. But yes, our neighbors next door in Spain, El País has described this as the most unpredictable election in the 50 years of democracy in Portugal, and it really couldn't be a more accurate description. We have a far-right candidate, 3 right-wing candidates, a socialist, and former Navy admiral. So it really is quite a remarkable election. I voted yesterday before leaving London, because as a Portuguese abroad you can vote Saturday and Sunday, and it was the busiest I've seen the Portuguese consulate in all the 15 years I've voted from abroad. So I think there is this palpable feeling that this one really matters. Now, we know that it's most likely going to go to a runoff, which is quite rare in elections, in presidential elections in Portugal. It has happened, but this is almost certain because no candidate is projected to get outright majority. It is neck and neck between 3 candidates. André Ventura, who is from the Chega, the far-right party, socialist António Seguro, and then with José Coutinho Figueiredo from the Liberal Initiative, also right-wing, but who in this week of campaign has been embroiled in a bit of a Me Too scandal within his own one party, so we've seen him dip in the polls. It really will be a case of when polls close later today, an hour later in the Azores, to see who moves ahead. And there is a very likely scenario that going to the second round, we will have an election between the far right and a right-wing candidate. And, you know, even though officially it's been only 13 days of campaigning, I was in Portugal over Christmas. There were debates on TV, on the radio throughout the Christmas period. So the official campaign doesn't really mean anything. And I think going into the second round, one thing that we know for certain is that André Ventura is going to try to appeal and appear more moderate to try to capture some of those votes from the right. So really, you know, as we're going to be heading up to Davos today, I think I'll be glued to the tracking poll from CNN Portugal to try to figure out who's actually going to be on the ballot next time.
So Carlota, I guess you'll be on the Globalist tomorrow morning, I would imagine, with a little bit of an update on that. Carlota, thanks for the news roundup. Also, Christof as well. Gorana, I didn't put you on the spot. Also, thanks to Andrew Tuck back in London. It's just gone actually 10:39 here in London. You're listening to Monocle on Sunday with me, Tyler Brûlé. I'm very happy to say that we have a guest who's been very close to the family for a very long time, also since we started this business. Mario Garcia. If he's not a household name, certainly within sort of the Monocle realm, he should be, because this is a gentleman who has... His hands have been really across the reinvention of pretty much every newspaper, magazine, brand that we can think of today. In print in the early days, very much digital today. Author of a series of books, and one which is just hit right now, which is called Consulting with Heart. Good morning. Wonderful to have you here, Mario. Great to see you.
Good morning. Happy to be here again.
Listen, you've penned more than a title or two. As I said, you've had ink on your fingers for a very long time in a very positive way. I always would like to play that game, though. If I was on the Singapore or the Swiss flight with you yesterday, and I sort of was across the aisle, started chatting to this gentleman. What do you say? You talk about consulting, but when you have to define what you do, a lifetime of work, what's your pitch?
I think I would probably, when I was writing this book, I came to the conclusion that I have been an interpreter of dreams. When you're a consultant, you sit in conference rooms, and a lot of the people who hired you to be a consultant, half of the room thinks that they don't need a consultant. But I am always told, if you say it, it carries value with the people at the top. So I think I came to the conclusion that I have spent 56 years with 760 organizations interpreting their dreams. And I mean, because I'm 79 years old, sometimes the dream is, how would you see the Wall Street Journal in color? For some of them, it was not a dream, it was a nightmare. Some of these editors consider color to be a cheap quality newspaper, so they would come and beg you, please go easy on the color. We don't want to be a tabloid looking down market paper. So how do you interpret that dream? At the top, they tell you, we are going to put color into the Wall Street Journal by 1999 or whatever. And the people sitting around that table are begging you not to do that, because what is a dream of the CEO might not be the dream of the people who are going to execute it. So at the end of it, I would say I have interpreted dreams, and I still do.
You were, of course, listening into the top of the program as well, and this is going to be a week here in Switzerland, well, globally as well, about coalition building. So it's interesting when I hear about dealing with people on the top, and of course, if you think of being up in Davos, there's going to be a lot of media leaders. Of course, they're going to have a lot of foot soldiers there covering it as well. How much are you in the world of consulting also playing mediator? Because I think I've been in those rooms with you, Mario, where there's people who sit there with crossed arms saying, why is there someone in our midst who thinks they know our brand better? And of course, then the people at the top who are writing you a check for reinvention. How do you bring them together?
Yeah, I think that the key is to listen. And the second key is the consultant cannot be a transactional figure. If you are hired The reason I call this book Consulting with Heart is because I learned along the way, and I went back to my diaries. I always keep a diary, and so I had 200 of these moleskins, and I went back to remember each day and what happened each day. And in many of these days, you would go home and say, I quit. This is impossible. I cannot do this, because you have these conflicts that you're talking about. I think that listening is a quality. Listening, passion, and heart are the three things that the manual for consulting skips, or it doesn't give it a lot of play. You have to listen. The number of times that a person at the lowest level in this organization had the best idea. And then I would say, why is it that you are not the art director or the creative director or the editor? And chances are that nobody listened to this person, but the outsider comes in and says, you have the answer here. This person is the one person who could help this organization transform. Right now, the main conflict in most of these media organizations is moving to mobile first. They have the buildings, they have the infrastructure, futuristic buildings, but the mentality in many media houses, I would say 70% of them, they are still concentrating on print, tomorrow's news, as opposed to upgrading the story on the hour, every 15 minutes, whatever. That's the first thing. Suddenly you have another revolution, artificial intelligence. And in most of these conference rooms, artificial intelligence is treated as computer science and not as what it is. I teach at Columbia University, and I participate in meetings where the future of artificial intelligence among academics is planned. How are we going to teach? And they load up these groups with computer science engineers. And I say, where is the anthropologist? Where is someone from the humanities faculty? AI is not computer science. AI is based on words, and it will affect how novelists write, how journalists put together stories, how a poet comes up with an idea. And, they are afraid that AI is going to take over. And I say, AI can only give you what it finds. A human can give you what it feels. And once you realize that equation, then you welcome AI, because it's going to be like a crane next to you that does the heavy lifting. But it's very difficult for you to come into a room and do this without making these people feel that they are sort of ignorant.
I want to bring in Christof Münger, because Christof is, of course, with the Tagesanzeiger. He's running the foreign desk for that newspaper. You're a media group that has been through a lot of transformation and change. Still are. I'm not sure if also Mr. Garcia has been sort of the part of the author of that. But just what's your impression when you hear this? Because these are so many themes that, of course, are hitting newsrooms all over the world.
I just wanted to make a note what you said, and I think the very important sentence you said: AI can only do what it finds, and the human being can do or write what it feels or what he or she thinks. I think that's a very important insight, and AI is very helpful. It's a tool, but it's a tool. It's not a brain and not a soul. And I think that we should realize. And I liked your remark that AI is not a computer science, but you need the humanities and you need everything else, and anthropologists, and I think that's very important. And we haven't come to this point yet. It's still treated as a computer science.
So, Mario, if I'm a CEO, actually I am a CEO of a media organization.
Yes, you are.
I forgot. And maybe you heard me chatting to Andrew a little bit earlier. As Christof was saying, does this mean being witness, being present? I mean, these are things, of course, I'm sure they're going to be, and there are drones in development which can absorb and take quotes and do all kinds of things as well. Where would you deploy your money right now? If you thought, I'm running a newsroom, mobile first, where does that organization need to be? What do they need to be focused on in terms of being, of course, persuasive when it comes to audience, persuasive when it comes to advertisers, and also building audience?
Two important things. First, you need to start creating content in a vertical format. In my class, I do not allow people to bring sheets of paper. If they do, they have to fold it. All your thinking has to be vertical, not horizontal. Tell that to most of the newsrooms. I have just, been to a tour of Asia, and again, it's easier to change the architecture of the room than the mentality of the people. They sit in front of a computer and they are creating the content on a platform in which it will not be consumed. So how do you create? It will be 10 more years before a lot of these editors retire and so on, and there will be a new generation. By 22-year-old students at Columbia grab this, and the content is created vertically. Somebody is going to scroll. Second, sensorial. When I went to journalism school, we learned to construct stories in a certain way. Now, the way you construct a story is a WhatsApp conversation. You write and you show. I just arrived here. Look at the traffic. Picture. You don't do photo galleries. Photo galleries is print mentality. You see in print, you see, and then you read. The opposite is in mobile. So for journalists of a certain age, they have to relearn their craft. That's a revolution that hasn't taken hold fully. And I've worked with your teams on this. Suddenly there is an AI revolution in which you have this assistant that could be a tremendously wonderful assistant next to you, but then you fear it and so on. And so this is where I come in with the scent of the human. I believe that we are going to see more first-person journalism, even in stories where first-person journalism is popular in lifestyle, in food. I was there will become very important. And you're beginning to see it. Sometimes in The Guardian, in the New York Times, you see as you enter Gaza, you could see hunger in the face of the children. That narrative, 2 years ago, an editor would have said, too dramatic. But this is the I was there. The robots will never be able to write like that. They don't see, they don't feel. They will begin, in Gaza today, 25,000 children will go hungry because they have data. So I believe very strongly in the scent of the writer. You're going to have to mark your spot and tell me what you saw, what you smell. The human byline is gaining value by the day. If there is a human byline at the beginning of the story, 2 years from now, many stories are going to be written by robots. And it's, commercially, many CEOs are going to be attracted to that idea, but those stories will not have a heart and a soul. And I think that we will see many stories where you plant yourself, and I say, a business interview where you came in to interview a CEO, suddenly you see pictures behind the desk of this person. Oh, he was a hockey player, so I'm going to begin. Competition is not new to so-and-so behind his desk because you were there, you saw this, the robot didn't.
Yeah, this and we've been talking about bearing witness for a while. Just very quickly, maybe if you're happy to stick around the mic, it would be great. Consulting with Heart is out now. Where do our listeners around the world find it, Mario?
You can find it with Amazon.com, and you can find it almost anywhere. And it surprised me. This is the first book I wrote that has an appeal, sold in airports and so on. My books have all been academic books adopted by universities, but this one has hit a chord with a basic premise that you have to be a human, you have to have a heart.
Mario Garcia from Garcia Media, thanks. Stick around. It's just gone 10:51 here in London. We want to now really sort of prep because we are Davos bound. Carlota Rebelo here, of course, from our side. Also, Prashanth Shanmugan, who was here sort of towards the back end of last year. You were, I believe, was it Birkenstock or you were in Lucerne? You were somewhere. Anyway, you're the president of the Australian Council on Foreign Relations. You're also, as it says on the label here, corporate diplomacy advisor as well. Welcome. Very good to see you again.
Good morning and good day, world.
Listen, maybe I'll start with you from an APAC perspective, certainly from an Australia perspective. You heard the top of the program. It's amazing how things get sort of pushed to the sideline. What are you looking for there? Do your friends in Australia, do your friends in New Zealand even have a voice at the table when everything seems so focused on a particular geographical patch at the moment?
Well, it's summer in the Southern Hemisphere. I just left 42 degrees.
So everyone's feet is up and they're not really tuned in anyway, right?
It's 42 degrees. Goats are crashing into shops and kangaroos and shark attacks and what have you. So there is no official Australian delegation at Davos or New Zealand delegation.
This is true. This is really.
Yeah. I believe the former New Zealand Prime Minister Helen Clark will be at Davos in various houses and all that, but no official delegation. So I'm happy to represent the great nation of Australia slowly. Look, we had 65 heads of state and government at Davos this year. Also remember last year at the UNGA, there were 150 heads of state and government. But look at the composition of the heads and states of government. At the UN, they want something else. At Davos, figure out who's coming. Not just the heads of state, but every senior member of the Trump family will be at Davos. Yeah, things are happening. Things are happening at the sidelines. Real diplomacy happens not at the conference table, but at the dinner table. When you line up, when you have coffees, they're one-on-ones.
So when you talk about official delegations, though, when I think about the families, and there's lots of big Australian families in the extraction business and elsewhere, is there a decent size presence in terms of representing Australia Inc., though?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, they're there. If you can dig something out of the ground, you will be in Davos. If you sell something to our neighbours far north, you'll be there. But if you have a .gov in your email address, you may not be there.
Precisely. Just Carlota, just on that point of conversations happening to on the sideline, I was also thinking, Mario, when we were chatting as well, I was thinking about the 22-year-old with the great ideas. Also, how much is there the conversation happening outside the boardroom as well? But do you think that this is maybe also more important than ever? And maybe we talk about this reinvention of Davos as well. What is your sort of your expectation this year in terms of dialogue, but also just the construct of this? Because, as you said, more countries attending. It's a new world without Klaus Schwab at the table as well.
I really do agree with that statement that the real conversations do not actually happen inside a Congress Centre. And of course, invitations to those very exclusive dinners are difficult to have, but sometimes just going to the right session in one of the houses is enough for you to brush shoulders with the correct people, overhear something, grab 5 minutes for an interview. That's how we get most of our interviews, is by just attending some of the public events, despite all the time that we spend inside the actual Congress Centre. It is when you're lining up for coffee and someone that you've been emailing and perhaps their delegation has been stonewalling you, and then suddenly you grab those 5 minutes while you're both there together. Ukraine House tends to be quite a good one for this one. Go ahead.
Prashanth.
Oh, no, I was just saying, apart from that, don't forget, I'm invited by the Rosenberg Institute, so I'll be chairing a few panels and speaking to a few of them during the course of the week.
And joining us as well.
Yes, exactly. I will be joining. I'll be there. You'll have the Antipodean accent throughout the week. The thing is, it's the first time that there is a house designed, moderated, and run by students. And why is it important? Remember, last year we had Gen Z revolutions around the world, right? In Australia, we had the election last year. 47% of the electorate is millennials and Generation Z, outstripping baby boomers who made up 33% of the population. Remember, in Australia, voting is compulsory. In the UK, I believe it was somewhere in the 40s as well, in terms of combination of millennials and Gen Z. There's going to be the biggest transfer of wealth in the next decade from boomers to millennials and Gen Z. Right? Sometimes when you go to these conferences, it's like a cross between The Walking Dead and The Golden Girls, right? No one was born after 1979. Yeah. So it is important to listen to the voices of the next generation, and I think what the students at Rosenberg are doing is going to be interesting, and I'd highly recommend people turn up to that house if you can.
And I just want to bring up just a point and just bring Gorana in on this, because this notion of sort of millennials, I'm wondering how much there's going to be, and Gen Z, how much is going to be a conversation at a time when we are thinking about how are we going to defend ourselves, and this notion of conscription, a huge topic right now as well. I'm wondering does that also become a level that has to be sort of engaged to say, look at you want the world this way, but you might either have to be behind a keyboard or you might have to pick up a gun at some point as well.
I would say that we shouldn't assume a kind of homogeneity or kind of monolithic response on part of any generation. And there are some trends there with both millennials and Gen Z that we can see, but specifically on conscription, we've seen this time and again in various public opinion polls that have come out over the past couple of years. They are not so keen in taking up arms. There is this sort of a debate that goes on in terms of the kind of sentimentality, you could say, or patriotism that they would feel and so on. Some of these things can be changed, of course, but I would say also within that generation, what's interesting to me in some of the political discussions is increasingly in some of the elections, not Australia per se, but United States have shown that there is a huge gender divide as well that we have to think about. So it is that kind of concept of intersectionality, to make it super academic here, that you don't just think about who belongs to which generation, but also various other factors can play a role, whether it's again gender, whether it's socioeconomic status, and so on. But for sure, there is inevitable kind of replacement, if you wish, in terms of who is taking the lead. We see that also with the leaders now of certain countries. And again, we shouldn't assume that being a millennial or being Gen Z will undoubtedly make you a progressive, right? So that's another maybe thing, a crease to add to this.
Prashanth, sorry, Gorana, just 15 seconds or less. So what are you looking forward to this week, aside from lots of raclette and things you don't get in Australia?
I'm going to embrace the chaos and the uncertainty. It's going to be madness, and throw caution to the wind and just enjoy being in the presence of chaos.
Great. Carlota, listeners can find us across the week, I believe, up until Thursday anyway, until things wrap.
Absolutely. We'll be doing debriefing Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday from Davos, and reporting throughout the other shows, including checking in with our colleagues in Nuuk.
Yes, exactly. The Monocle Daily is going to be coming from Nuuk, I believe, on Tuesday and Wednesday, perhaps Thursday as well. I'm going to have to say a huge thank you to Christof, Münger, also to Gorana Grgić. Mario, always amazing seeing you. Thanks for being here. Also, Prashanth as well. Our show is produced by Desiree Bentley today, also Mariella Bevan, Emma Nelson, of course, back in London. And a huge thanks to Andrew Tuck as well. Monocle on Sunday will be coming to you from Paris next week from Studio 5. See you then. Bye-bye.